Yeah, I have very interesting readings today. But the gospel we will take up today is the parable of Good Samaritan. I think everybody is familiar with this parable. Well, first is it teaches us to love our neighbor. But maybe we will ask, like the scholar asked, who is my neighbor? We can say that our neighbor is every human being, including our enemies. The parable also teaches us that we must show love for our brothers and sisters by being attentive to their needs, even at the cost of personal sacrifice. Only if we fulfill these conditions can we claim to be disciples of Jesus. Not easy, isn't it? But let us first take a look at the first reading and what it tells us about this. Our first reading is from Deuteronomy 30, verses 10 to 14. You know, when I first read this, I thought the first sentence, I thought there's lacking in this sentence. It just said, it just says, when you obey the Lord your God by observing his commandments and decrees that are written in this book of the law, because you turn to the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Kulang, di ba? But then, if you will go to the verse before this, it says that for the Lord will again take delight in prospering you, just as he delighted in prospering your ancestors. It means that when we turn to God and obey his law, God will bless us and gives us more blessings, not only spiritually, but also in material things. But you know, the church does not want to focus on this. To obey God is to enjoy prosperity. It's true. That's why there are religion or sect that we can who focus on this. We can call them maybe the gospel of prosperity. It is true that God will give us the material things we need, but the church, because you know it's dangerous that we can be attached to material things, and this, you know, these material things can disappear later. What the church wants us to focus is on our spiritual life, which is more important. But here in these readings, but the main point of this passage is not that we can get is that we can get closer to God if we have to obey his laws. Leave them out. The word of the Lord has already been uttered, and it is in our mouths and in our hearts. Jeremiah 31 verse 33 says, I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. See, the law of the Lord is already within us. We say that we want to see God. We want to be closer to him. We don't have to go to heaven to cross the other side of the sea, as the reading says. All we have to do so that we can feel God, we have to live out the word that we are learning. The Lord is not very far away from us. Sometimes we feel that we want to increase or deepen our faith. So we think that, oh, we have to see a miracle. We have to go to pilgrimage, especially those apparition of the Virgin Mary. I am not asking that This, this, these are not good. Well, if we go there only out of curiosity and there is no change of heart, then I think it will be useless. The Lord is closer already within us. He is in our hearts. All we have to do is to obey His law. If we connect to our gospel today to remain close, we have to obey God's law, who is love. We have to obey His law of love, that is, to love our neighbor. We come to the second reading, Colossians 1, verses 15 to 20. This is a very important passage, and it's quite difficult passage. I will not be able to discuss all the meaning of this, but in connection with our parable today, the parable of Good Samaritan, it points us to Christ, that Christ is the firstborn who models for us how to live God's law, how to please God. Jesus Christ has already showed us how to live the law of God. That is why it says that, for in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him God was pleased to reconcile himself all things. It also says that in the light of the gospel, Colossians points to the universal and definitive outreach of Christ's event and the need to proclaim it everywhere. God is not only the God of the Jews, the God of the Christians, but the God of all, even those who are not reconciled with our faith. And this is the reason why the Lord wants us to love everyone. Including those who are not believers or those whom we find it hard to love, or our enemies. God wants us to save all. And this is the point of the parable of the Good Samaritan. God is merciful and compassionate, and so must we. As Jesus said at the end of the parable, go and do likewise. So what does the parable mean for us here and now? Jesus used it to illustrate the most important quality he wants in his followers. It was his answer to the question of the scholar, who is my neighbor? The answer is that everyone without exception must be treated with love and respect. To understand this well, this parable, let us take a look of the characters in this parable. First, the traveler. In those times, it is said that the road from Jerusalem to Jericho was notoriously dangerous. And the traveler was, we can say, quite obviously reckless. It was, that route was lonely and difficult terrain in those times, and it was haven for bands of robbers. And people seldom attempted the Jerusalem to Jericho road alone. If they were carrying goods or valuables, they would not travel alone. And seeking safety in numbers, they traveled in convoys or caravans. And this man had no one but himself to blame for the plight in which he found himself. Maybe he traveled alone and he was robbed, he was beaten, and almost left dead. Lying naked, the injured man, and take note, is without sign of either nationality or social status. And I was thinking, sometimes we are like that. We just do what we want. And in front of God, we do not do what the Lord wants us to do. We don't care about things sometimes if we want to do it and we just do it. Sometimes we are careless, or how we could say reckless. And then there was the priest. Oh, the priest, imagine. A priest happened to be going down that road, but when he saw him, it says, he passed by on the opposite side. I wonder if it will happen to me. I will do the same. I am still thinking if an accident, especially nowadays, if I am driving alone and in the middle of the night and I see some accident, I wonder if I would stop and help those people. Well, in this case, he did not help the injured man. You know why he did not help? He was thinking that maybe that man was dead and he doesn't want to touch him. And no doubt he was remembering the law on the book of Numbers where it says in Numbers 19:11, those who touch the dead body of any human being shall be unclean 7 days. That was what they believed before. So the priest did not help. He could not be sure, but he feared that the man was dead. To touch him would mean losing his turn to duty in the temple, and he refused to risk that. He set the claims of the ceremonial above those of charity. The temple and its liturgy meant more to him than the pain of a man. So merong excuse, di ba? And we go to the Levite. A Levite came to the place. The same thing happened. When he saw him, he passed by on the opposite side. He could not help because he was worried. The bandits were in the habit of using the case. It's like today, isn't it? Sometimes people pretend to have an accident, and especially late in the night, and they sometimes would just want to rob you. One of their number would act the part of a wounded. In those days, one of the number would act the part of a wounded man. And when some unsuspecting travelers stopped over him, the others would rush upon him and overpower him. The Levite was a man, we could say, whose motto was safety first. He would take no risk to help anyone else. And then we come to the Samaritan. His coming was described in the same way. You see, as one of the priests and Levite, just like the priest and the Levite, it says, making his way when he sees. At this point, we expect a repetition that he will just pass by. Instead, the rhythm is broken by what it says. He had compassion. This may be a shock for those who knows the history of the Jews and the Samaritan. You know, the Jews had no dealings with the Samaritan before. If we will take a look at their history, in the past, there was a hatred that existed between the Jews and the Samaritans. It says that after the Babylonian exile, the Samaritan has opposed the restoration of Jerusalem. And in the 2nd century BC, he had the Samaritan helped the Syrian rulers in their wars against the Jews. And in the early 1st century AD, the Samaritans scattered the bones of corpses in the temple during Passover, defiling the temple and preventing the celebration of the feast. That's why the Samaritan and the Jews could not reconcile with each other. And more so, it says that the Samaritan, they worship other gods. So the shock of the parable is that the one who stops, who helped the injured person, is the enemy of the religious apostate of the Jews. He was the one, according to this parable, he was the one who fulfills the law. The Samaritan is the one who teaches the true meaning of the law of love, of neighbor. This challenges us, isn't it, of the understanding of God, of our understanding of God, and whom God approves it. My professor would always say, heaven, we will be surprised with the people that we'll see there. Maybe maybe like what Jesus did, or he healed many people. Maybe we will see their prostitute that we think that they will never get there. Maybe we will see our enemies there. We don't know. But it's also here that the one that God approves is the one that we least expected. Do we not sometimes judge people because they are from different religion? They are different from our social status. They're not educated. They're not true followers of Christ. They cannot follow Christ. This teaches us that we must unlearn some beliefs that are not correct in following Jesus. Knowledge of the law, knowledge of God is not enough. We can say that the Jews are very knowledgeable with the laws of the Lord. Here in this parable, the priests, the Levites, are caught in moral dilemma to observe the Torah on uncleanness or the Torah on the love of neighbor. Sometimes we are put in the same situation. It always happened to us, especially here in our house, when someone asks. There are many people who ask for help. Before we used to help them. So what we do, because especially when they said that they need money for medical reasons, for buying medicine. But we learned also that there are many people also who come back again and do the same thing. And so we don't know if they are just fooling us, or they are just really asking for money and the reason is not valid. There are people who ask for rice again and again, and every day we give them. But then sometimes it goes to a point that we cannot rest. We are always being disturbed by these people. What do we do? Shall we help every people who comes to us? So this is also a question that I also asked to the Lord. Here in this case, the Samaritan, who both lay person and outsider, embodies the true interpretation of the law. And this is so ironic. One of the major disputes between Jews and Samaritans was over the observance of the laws of the first 5 books of Moses. So why do we say that the Samaritan here is the one who obeyed the law of God? True religious observance consists of deeds of mercy and loving kindness. Ironically, then, the Samaritan who was doubly unclean, imagine, we could say that if he's ready to touch the dead, who was doubly unclean because of his apostate status and potential contact with the corpse, offers the true sacrifice. And though member of a religious group that did not recognize the prophets, because the Samaritans, they recognize only the 5 books of Moses, we can say that he embodies the prophetic call to the true religion. He saw the half dead. He had compassion. Compassion is the bridge between simply looking an uninjured and half-dead fellow and human beings and entering their world with saving care. We can see this compassion in Jesus. In Luke 7, verse 13, Jesus saw the woman who is burying her son, has compassion on her, and then restores her son. In Luke 15:20, the father sees the returning son. Remember the parable of the prodigal son? The father sees the returning son. He has compassion and welcomes him home. And in one of the hymns of the infancy narrative, the Benedictus of Zechariah, Zechariah praises John, who will go before the Lord to prepare his way, to give knowledge, it says, of salvation to his people in the forgiveness of their sins. And it says, through the tender compassion of our God, when the day shall dawn upon on high. The compassion of God stands behind the coming of Jesus. Just in Exodus chapter 3, verse 7 to 8, the Lord comes to the aid of suffering people of Israel after seeing their affliction, hearing their cries, and knowing their sufferings. So we can say that compassion is that divine quality, which when present in human beings, it enables us to share deeply in the sufferings and the needs of others, and enables us to share deeply in the and the needs of others, and enables us to move one word to other, from word to helper to the one needing help, from the word of the innocent to that of the sinner. We can see the action of the Samaritan then does not stop in just pouring out of oil and wine on the wounds. It did not stop there, isn't it? He brought the injured man to the inn. Maybe we can say that this is already an excess of charity in a person. Well, we can admire. And he takes care of him, stays the night, then pays the innkeeper 2 denarii, enters into a contract, and to pay the other bills the injured man might incur. According to the law of time, a person with that unpaid debt could not be enslaved until the debt was paid. Since the injured man was robbed, he was stripped and does not have any resources, well, he could have been at the mercy of the innkeeper. But in this case, the Samaritan assures the injured man's freedom from the debt from the innkeeper. And the parable tells us that it is not enough simply to enter the world of the neighbor with care and compassion. It is not enough to feel compassion. We must enter and live in such a way that the neighbor is given freedom along with the very help that is offered. This challenges us. One, Jesus is telling us and challenges us. First, we must help a man even when he was brought his trouble on himself. Imagine, as the traveler had done. Sometimes we say to our brothers and sisters, buti nga sa'yo. You know, it serves you right. You have done and magdusa ka. You suffer the consequences if we know that it's his fault or her fault. But even though telling us, the parable is telling us, even though he has done this, we must be ready to help him to get out of the situation. Number two, any man of any nation or any social status, anyone who is in need is our neighbor. Our help is wide as the love of God. Number three, the help must be practical and not consist of merely in feeling sorry. Diba? Okay, I saw you, I feel that compassion, and it would stop me there. No doubt the priest and the Levite felt a pang of pity for the wounded man, but they did nothing. Compassion, to be real, must have the corresponding deed. We might wonder what the Samaritan had to gain personally from doing this act of charity. The answer in material terms is precisely nothing. But love, when it is real, when it is true, does not expect anything in return. What merit is there in being good only to our friends who will reward us in return? Should the need arise, Christian love must be more inclusive than that. And further, if we do not show love to the neighbor whom we see, as Jesus said, then no matter what commandments we keep, what ritual sacrifices we join in, as did the priest and the Levite in the parable, we become incapable of loving God we cannot see. If we join the Eucharistic meal, if we always join the Mass every day and receive God's sons into our hearts, we must first cleanse our hearts of hatred, bitterness, ill will, because the God we receive in, in this sacrament is the God of love. As Pope Francis, he says, love, after all, can never be just an abstraction. By its very nature, it indicates something concrete. Intentions, attitudes, and behavior are not shown are shown in daily living. Besides all this reason, I also been struggling before how to love everybody without exception. And I asked the Lord, Lord, why should I love everybody? Isn't it not enough to love my friends, to love my family, to love those who love me? Can I just do and obey your law and love those who love me? But he answered me like, I want you to love like me, to love like I love. I love each and every one of you. You are all one, isn't it? You are a family. And I don't want anybody to be lost. Remember, the parable of the lost coin and the lost sheep that Jesus said, I will go out of my way to find just one lost sheep. I also learned this from my mother, who loves us all in the family. We are 7 children in the family. And I remember that there was a time, 5 children, we have good jobs, and 2 are struggling in their finances. So every time that the 2 does not have money, what she did, what she does, she will go to us and said, I don't have any more money. Can you give me money? And so at first I believed her. And then later I discovered the money that I was giving her, she just gave it to my brother who doesn't have money. At first I resented that because every bonus that I have and the salary that I have, I will give it to her. But then later I just discovered that's being spent by my brother. And later I don't want to give anymore. And even now, they already retired. They just received their pension. She still supports one of my brothers. And one time I asked her, Ma, you should stop supporting him so that he could learn. You are already old. You should save your money and enjoy life. And you know how she answered me? Anong gagawin ko sa pera? What will I do of my money? If one of your brother is suffering, I could not live with that. I'd rather spend my money for your brothers. Isn't it? So now I understand her. It is true, no? She has money, but then what will she do with the money? You who are mothers, I think you understand this. You understand that you want, that you desire that even one of your children will be lost, and you'll do anything to help one one son or daughter who is lost. And there's another reason. Just lastly, that there's another reason that I have learned why I should love everybody, even those people whom I feel that they are difficult to love. And I've learned this from what I read from the dialogue of Saint Catherine of Siena in her book, The Dialogue of Siena. The Lord says to her, she says, I require that you should love me with the same love with which I love you. This indeed you cannot do because I love you without being loved. All the love which you have for me, you owe it to me, so that it is not grace that you love me, but because you owe to do so. If we say we love God, it is our duty to love God because we owe everything from Him. And He says, while I love you of grace and not because I owe you my love, the Lord loves us not because it is His duty, not because it is His responsibility. He loves us not for anything else. So this is the love that does not really expect anything in return. And he continues and he says, therefore to me in person, you cannot repay the love with which I require of you. Isn't it? Can we repay the love that the Lord has given us? He has given us everything that we have. So what can we do to repay Him? And he continues, and I have placed you in the midst of your fellows, that you may do to them that which you cannot do to me. the things that we cannot do, that we want to do for God, God placed our neighbor within us so that what we cannot do to our God, we can do to Him. That you may love your neighbor of free grace without expecting any return from Him. What you do to Him, I count it as you have done it to me. When we love our neighbor, we can say that we love God. And is it not what Jesus had said at the judgment day? And says, the king will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. I hope I was able to share to you enough reason why we should continue to love, why we should love everyone, why we should love like Jesus. So when we learn to love our neighbor, the least of our neighbor, we are learning to love God and learning to love like Him. Yes, it's true, it's not easy to follow that. But to be disciple of Christ, we must do it. And finally, I will leave you with one quote from, from a very famous writer. You know, he says, from G.K. Chesterton, you know, he says, if you were accused of being a Christian, if you were accused of being a Christian, will there be enough evidence to convict you? If you were accused of being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? That means that are you going out your way to follow God's law? Are you going out your way to love your neighbor? So, in our meditation today, and I am sharing this and giving you the questions that you may ask. Sorry, through the action. It is through the action of the Samaritan. Is though the action of the Samaritan is at the center of the parable, what character can I identify myself? Am I a traveler who doesn't care, who just do what I want to do? Am I the priest who is who wants to be faithful to the rituals that I tend to forget and would not have compassion with my brother or sister? Or am I the Levite who will just focus on my safety, me first before everybody else? Or am I the Samaritan who have compassion to my brothers and sisters? Number two, do I have compassion to my brothers and sisters? How far I have gone in terms of helping them? Let us examine, let us think. Did I really help someone up to the point of freeing him to or unburdening him or her with his load? Number three, we can ask the question of G.K. Chesterton. If we were accused of being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Would there be enough evidence to convict us?